I've always been a Legend of Zelda fan and have played a wide variety of Zelda games, like Skyward Sword, Wind Waker, Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, and some of the DS games like Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass. Unfortunately, I haven't beaten any of those games, but it would be safe to say that I'm familiar with Legend of Zelda and have always enjoyed the series. I started really getting into the series when Breath of the Wild released on the Switch in 2017. I sadly never got a Switch, even still to this day, but my cousin did, and oh boy did we spend way too much time playing that game together. We would switch, playing and watching each other and having a blast hanging out and experiencing the game together. Hours of fun times and memories came from just playing Breath of the Wild mindlessly from dusk to dawn. It was one of the first games I've ever 100% completed, and although I wasn't playing all the time, I was still there with my cousin, switching between playing and watching us get every shrine, every side quest, and every small interaction done. Nonetheless, Breath of the Wild has always been one of my favorite games since its release. When I heard of the sequel to Breath of the Wild, I was ecstatic along with my cousin, but we were still patient and just let the time pass until finally, years later, the sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, released this May. I bought the game for my cousin, and we eventually got together to play the game, although let's just say I used some alternative means of playing the game so I could play along. When I initially played it before playing with my cousin, I borrowed my friend Ben's Switch so I could get some first impressions of the game, and surprisingly, I wasn't a fan. At first, it felt like they used the same exact recipe for the story and overall plot of the first game. Let's see, event happens that Zelda goes missing, something detrimental happens to Link, wake up in some weird area with ancient technology, discover and complete puzzles and shrines to gain your abilities, complete more shrines to upgrade your stats, go to towers to show the map, and explore the same map as Breath of the Wild. Well, that's what I thought originally. Either way, I was really let down by how similar Tears of the Kingdom felt to the beginning of Breath of the Wild, and was expecting a different experience with a different map, especially since I had waited 5 years for what felt like a copy of the first game. Now, of course, some of these expectations were a bit wild of me to create, but nonetheless, I was worried that this game had become another Cyberpunk, with people's expectations high but completely under-delivering, or Overwatch 2 with its promise to completely change the game and be a true sequel, but then being a complete mess and canceling one of the biggest reasons a sequel was even made in the first place. At this time, I was naive and I didn't know much of what was ahead of me. When I really got into playing it more than just getting to Central Hyrule, I was finally able to understand the game's mechanics and overall methodology of what the game was supposed to be, a direct improvement of the game's mechanics from Breath of the Wild, rather than a completely different game. So, let's talk about the major changes of Tears of the Kingdom. The abilities you get are essentially upgrades of the previous ones. Instead of Magnesis, you have Ultra Hand to interact with almost everything rather than just metallic objects. Instead of Stasis, you have Recall to freeze objects and rewind the object in time to create intriguing and unique interactions within the world. Instead of Cryonis, you have Ascend to still give the player a means of vertical travel, but in a more convenient and interesting way. Most of these abilities are just straight upgrades that create more freedom and mechanics to mess around with, which was a major point of the first game. Sadly, we don't have the remote bomb anymore, but they made the ability less needed with the other powers you attain and improved qualities and aspects of the materials you acquire. Even with all these similarities and upgrades of previous mechanics, the biggest addition to Tears of the Kingdom that truly makes it a separate game from Breath of the Wild are the Zonai devices. These completely change how you play the game and finally add another means of travel by being able to build vehicles and other means of transportation. They have much more use than that too, like creating contraptions and machines that make the game much more interesting and widen the potential drastically as to what you can create, and having the freedom to really do whatever you want. Tears of the Kingdom overall takes the sense of freedom and exploration in Breath of the Wild and cranks it to 11. There are also many other improvements that were made to the game, like only having one type of arrow instead of a plethora of different elemental arrows, and simply being able to attach materials to the tips of your arrows to give special effects to them. Or the improved weapon system, using the fuse ability to create your own weapons and having even more freedom with your attack options. On top of all of this, the story is way more involved and interesting, with the game also feeling much longer than Breath of the Wild, assuming you fix all the divine beasts that is. The memories you can find via Impa's questline feel like they actually give you a story and something to follow than Breath of the Wild, and give much needed context to the game. There is overall much more to do, explore, and find throughout the world which you can't find in Breath of the Wild. Of course, I can list many of these smaller changes, but there would be too much to talk about, so let's move on to the issues I think Tears of the Kingdom has. I think the biggest problem for many people that keeps them away from trying these games is the weapon durability system. It's never fun to see a weapon you love to use and enjoy having break on you in your most dire moments. It also feels as if the enemy's health or the weapon's damage have been inflated in some way, because I don't remember most of these enemies taking this many hits to take down, let alone just getting a decent enough weapon to actually deal damage. Fuse is meant to alleviate this issue so you can create powerful weapons on the fly, but I still believe it feels too forced and would have appreciated it if some weapons were actually viable without having to fuse that weren't super rare at least. Another gripe I've always had with the game is the actual combat itself. It feels kind of stiff and uninspired, with Link doing the same exact attack combo every single time, hitting the enemy far away and you catching up to them just to do the same thing over again. For this reason, I rarely found the normal spear charge attack worth using, since it sends the enemy flying away and completely closes off any combo potential or damage entirely. Because of all of this, the combat feels very two-dimensional, since all the attacks in the game can be separated into moves that push the enemy away, or moves that stun the enemy just so you can push the enemy away again and rinse and repeat. It would have been very refreshing to see some more aspects of combat added to the current system. However, I believe the biggest problem with the game is the performance and how well it runs on the Switch. The game is quite literally bottlenecked by the processing power of the Switch and leads to many things needing to be compromised just so the game can run natively on the Switch, which is why I used alternative means to play the game. I don't blame Nintendo for what they had to do, but knowing that a game could have been better or even had more features if it was just allowed to run on better hardware is a bit unfortunate. The game is capped at 30 FPS, which makes the game less smooth and more clunky than games that don't do so. It's seriously one of those things you might not notice or even care for until you play on better hardware. For example, some games on last-gen consoles are capped at 30 FPS, but once you upgrade to the current generation and are able to play those games without the restrictions, they feel so much better and you quite literally become better at the game because of it. I was in the situation to have a moddable Switch and do what I did, and being able to play at 60 FPS with mods was a literal game-changing experience. Everything was easier to do. Aiming was effortless, making precise movements got much easier, and just the overall feel of the game improved drastically. In addition to the 30 FPS cap on Switch, the game runs at around 720p resolution if handheld, and a maximum of 900p resolution if docked. But most of the time, the Switch heavily downscales the visuals in some parts to keep a consistent frame rate. The game looks very pixelated and just not that good a lot of the time, and both the graphics themselves and the frame rate can tank if too many things are happening on the screen, like explosions. Your game will stutter and run much slower for brief moments, and the graphics can turn into a PS2 game. It's just not a pleasant experience, and I wish the game was better natively. It's the same exact problem some high-end games run into, like Cyberpunk on last-gen consoles, and overall games taking a ridiculous amount of processing power just to run a game at a standard frame rate and resolution. I wouldn't take Tears of the Kingdom as being a super intensive game, which is why the Switch's outdated hardware is just not enough anymore, and a new Switch-like console would really help Tears of the Kingdom shine brighter than ever before, and this is coming from someone that's seen this game at its fullest potential currently with modding. The game is also littered with constant black screens just so the game can load a couple objects or environments. I really shouldn't need to load a black screen just for some people to get in the carriage. Some of the simplest actions end up bringing a black screen to watch. The reason I'm bringing this up is because it's obvious this was implemented because of the limitations of the Switch, in my opinion. There could have been a world where shrines have seamless loading screens, actions with NPCs actually having small cutscenes for their actions, and generally not having to stop the flow of the game just because I wanted to talk to someone at a stable. On top of this, I found the NPC's movement, especially during cutscenes, to be quite robotic and unnatural. You can almost see the programming that went into the character's movements. It's kinda funny. But the last thing I'll mention is that the villages don't make much sense. This might sound weird, but it seems like a lot of the buildings and establishments in the game are just lazily built. Go into any inn and you'll simply see a building or area just with beds, and that's it. This isn't at all what an inn should be like. Go to any shop and it seems so off. Why is this how the store is set up? Why are there no other people selling things in the area? Why isn't there a marketplace to find more goods than just the standard arrows, apples, and other cooking ingredients? It just seems weird. The interior design is just... what? Now, to preface, I said most villages do this, meaning that not every single village has every single one of these aspects I mentioned, but most have some combination of inhuman characteristics that make the area uncanny and overall not making much sense. Because of this, I find Hateno Village to be by far the most realistic village in the game, with plenty of houses, a school, a variety of activities going on in the area like farms, clothing customization, and aspects that make the village unique, and overall a sense of depth within the area. Then, you go to Rito Village, and it's just a pillar with some room extensions going up, and that's it? This is the village where the majority of Rito live? It might not seem like a lot, but it's these small issues with the game that hinder it from being a flawless game. All of these issues were present in Breath of the Wild, and sadly were not changed in Tears of the Kingdom. Even if these issues were improved upon, there are still always going to be people that just don't want to try the game out or don't care enough to put time into it, which is kind of sad for such an amazing game in the end. The game doesn't do everything right and doesn't improve on things I would have liked to be improved on, but just looking at those aspects would be doing the game a huge disservice for how much more it brings to the series and the amount of freedom you have to do whatever you want. Looking at this game as an upgraded experience to Breath of the Wild rather than a completely separate game really helped me understand that I shouldn't take this game for granted and enjoy the experience as much as I can. There is much more to talk about that makes Tears of the Kingdom such a good game, like the new areas present, but I want to keep this as spoiler-free as possible if I can. So, what do you think about Tears of the Kingdom? Thank you all for watching, I really appreciate any support you give me, and I'll see you guys next time.